Grand rising, everyone. I like coming to live spirit and coffee. Got my coffee here. hmm Very good. hmm Awesome possum. Let's get started a little bit earlier today. We'll see if people jump on early. Um, I used to do this at like 5 o'clock in the morning, and then life happens, things change, my times change. So may or may not continue to do it at certain times, and we'll see how that goes. But hopefully, I can get on earlier. What I'd like to do today, though, and we'll see, I want to read from Daring Greatly, Brene Brown. Now, I at first was like, who is this Brene Brown person? And everybody's talking about and this and that, and didn't realize that she actually is a researcher. um, and started kind of listening to her stuff. I don't follow people very easily. I don't jump on everybody's hype. That's not my thing. It's never has been, because I know myself, and that's really what this is about: is you getting to know yourself, right? Spiritual alchemy is about you knowing who you are and trusting yourself and your internal self. So, I don't just go following people, but she does research. She's a researcher, and she was doing a lot of research on vulnerability, shame, and all that kind of stuff. And I think with this, I want to read this chapter out of this book, which is called Daring Greatly, if you ever want to read it. If not, I'm going to read chapter 3, which is Understanding Combating Shame, which I think is such a critical topic. I think she is awesome. She did a lot of research on this and what it means, and I think that it's important that we understand what it is, because it's a worthiness conversation. And when we start to look at ourselves and say, hey, I don't think I'm worthy, I don't think I'm enough, there's a result in the way that we interact with people, with their world, with the things around us. And so we can reclaim our life and our sanity and our beauty if we allow ourselves to recognize what shame is and how to overcome it. Okay. So, chapter 3, Understanding Combating Shame, aka Gremlin Ninja Warrior Training, which I love, right? Okay. We can say Kung Fu Warrior, though. Gremlin Kung Fu Warrior, training. Shame derives its power from being unspeakable. Okay, that's why it loves perfectionists. It's so easy to keep us quiet. If we cultivate enough awareness around the shame to name it, to speak it, we basically cut it off at the knees. Shame hates having words wrapped around it. If we speak shame, it begins to wither. Just the way exposure to light was deadly for the gremlins, language and story bring light to shame and destroy it. So it does take vulnerability to talk about our stories. It does take vulnerability to open up, because of why? Well, shame, right? They're part of it is shame. Now they do a distinction between other emotions, but shame, they explain it greatly in this book. Okay, vulnerability and shame in one book. Are you trying to kill us, or defense against the dark arts? So this kind of, I like, the reason why I was really intrigued by her as well is because she does actually use Harry Potter. I love Harry Potter, so she is. I said, okay, she gets alchemy, and that's what I love, because Harry Potter is all about alchemy. And so even though she's not using the word alchemy, it is alchemy. Okay. Last year, after I finished a talk, Wholehearted Families, a man approached me on the stage. He stuck out his hand and said, I just want to thank you. I shook his hand and offered him a smile as he looked down at the floor. I could tell that he was fighting back tears. He took a deep breath and said, I have to tell you that I really didn't want to come out tonight. I tried to get out of it, but my wife made me. I chuckled. Yeah, I get a lot of that. I couldn't understand why she was so excited. I told her that I couldn't think of a worse way to spend a Thursday night than listening to a shame researcher. She said it was really important to her and I had to stop complaining. Otherwise, I'd ruin it for her. He paused for a few seconds. Then he surprised me by asking, Are you a Harry Potter fan? I stalled for a second while I tried to connect everything he was saying. When I finally gave up, I answered his question. Yes, I'm a huge fan. I've read all the books and several times, and I've watched and rewatched the movies. I'm hardcore. Why? He looked a little embarrassed before he explained. Well, I didn't know anything about you, and as my dread built up about coming tonight, I kept picturing you as Snape. I thought you'd be scary. I thought you'd be wearing all black and that you talk slowly in a deep, haunting voice like the world was ending. I laughed so hard that I almost spat out my water I was drinking. I love Snape. I'm not sure that you want to look like him, but he's my favorite character. I immediately glanced over at my purse, which was still tucked under the bottom of the podium. In it, my keys were and are attached to my beloved Lego Snape keychain. Okay, so here's what I love. Good morning to those on Facebook. She loves Snape. I love Snape. He's my favorite character. So I was like, okay, this lady might know a little something about something. How arrogant of me sometimes. I can be a little arrogant, I know. But it's not even okay, I will say it's arrogance. We're just gonna put that out there. It's also not just arrogance, but it's also because I don't trust that people, good morning, Christina, people with it's your life. And when you're listening to people and you're following people, they can actually set you on a trajectory that's unhealthy if you don't truly know, right? If you don't truly understand the work and if they don't explain it. But she's a researcher and she applies it to her life. And so I'm like, okay, I can get on board with this woman. I can get on board with what she's saying. Plus, she understands that Snape was the best character. Totally agree with her. I could probably have a whole conversation of why. And we could probably go back and forth, okay? In my opinion, he was the greatest alchemist in the storyline. People make fun of him in other ways, but he was, okay? He was able to transmute all of that pain into unconditional love, which is not easy to do. Even though it didn't seem that way, he did, right? Yes, I recently did a social media cleanup and it's accurate. Positive energy, promote positive energy. Absolutely. Okay, so she has the Snape. So we shared a laugh about the snake projection. Then things got more serious. What you said made sense to me, especially the part about being so afraid of the dark stuff. What's the quote that you shared with the picture of the twinkle lights? Oh, that twinkle lights quote, it's one of my favorites. Only when we're brave enough to explore the darkness will we discover the infinite power of our light. Okay, good morning, Tulian. And the reason that I wanted to read this chapter out of this book is because we were talking in spiritual alchemy about the darkness, about going through all of the icky stuff. We have to go through it in order to come out of it. And again, and I keep expressing this and I keep saying this over and over again, and probably sound like a broken record, and that's fine, is that we've been taught to suppress that or pretend that it doesn't exist or to make it bad, shame it, say it's wrong, and never given the tools to move through it. Now we see, right, that we are starting to, or things are starting to pop up of how do we get through the darkness? How do we get through all of this stuff? Well, we're going through it right now. There's so much going on in the world. It's nearly impossible not to actually have to face the darkness. We're staring at it in the face right now. And so should it be as scary as we're making it? Well, it's going to be because for a lot of people because they've never faced it. They it's almost like the gremlins, like she calls it. It's like they've been hiding out in the dark, creeping, and we've never dealt with them one at a time. If we had dealt with them one at a time, we wouldn't be dealing with 50 all at once. That can be overwhelming. It could be hard to deal with all your shit and all the shit of the world all at one time, right? It's almost like you get those days, right, where you're like, God, can I even handle all this? Like, I'm done, right? We get those moments. I don't know if you have. I know I have. I get those moments where I'm like, I'm over it. I'm done. I can't take anymore. It's too much. Well, we're at that state, but it's because no one taught us how to overcome these dark um, parts. And that's why I wanted to read what she has to say about shame because I think it helps us to understand and to move through it. So Snape projection. Okay. So I want to read that one more time. Only when we are brave enough to explore the darkness will we discover the infinite power of our light. He nodded. Yes, that one. I'm sure that's why I didn't want to come. It's crazy how much energy we spend trying to avoid these hard topics when really the only ones that can set us free, we're the only ones who can set us free. I was shamed a lot growing up, and I don't want to do that to my 3 kids. I want them to know that they're enough. I want them to know not to be afraid to talk about the hard shit with us. I want them to be shame resilient. Now, I love the what he said, shame resilient. He didn't say overcome the shame, or not, I'm sorry, not overcome, forget about the shame, or act as though it doesn't exist, or turn it off, but be resilient with. And I think that word resilience is critical when we're doing the work. We are resilient. Anybody who's on this podcast, anybody who comes to Spiritual Alchemy, and not just this podcast, any podcast that is dealing with moving through dark emotions and overcomes those dark emotions is resilient. You're a warrior. That's why they call it ninja warrior, kung fu warrior, because you're overcoming. It doesn't matter what's thrown at you, you're able to move through it like a warrior. And we rise again and we're resilient. And that's what makes us heroes. That's the hero's journey. I even was listening to this quote today. I typically don't listen to this stuff, but it was this motivation, and that's what he said. We have to move through that darkness. That darkness is what makes us the hero. We don't understand what healing means until we actually have been wounded and gone through healing ourselves. So it's the process of moving through it. Okay. Good morning, Lurak. Okay. So, by the way, I'm reading Daring Greatly. I'm reading Brene Brown. It's chapter 3, and it's about shame, which is an amazing topic. And it goes perfectly with what I was reading in the transformational book just recently about fermentation and the process of fermentation and emotions. Okay. So, at this point, we were both teary eyed. I reached up, did an awkward "are you a hugger" gesture, and then gave him a big old hug. After we let go of our "this stuff is hard, but we can do it" embrace, he looked at me and said, "I'm pretty bad at vulnerability, but I'm really good at shame. Is getting past shame necessary for getting to vulnerability?" Yes. Shame resilience is key to embracing our vulnerability. We can't let ourselves be seen if we're terrified by what people might think. Often not being good at vulnerability means that we're damn good at shame. So if we can't do vulnerability, then we're good at shame. Okay. And she gets into what shame is. And there's a distinction between it, right? There's all these other emotions, and it's not just shame. Okay. So, Tullian, I typically don't get callers, but I'm willing to let you call in if you want to call in again. As I stumbled before the language to explain shame stopped us from being vulnerable and connected, I remembered my very, very favorite exchange from Harry Potter. Do you remember when Harry was worried that he might be bad because he was angry all the time and he had the dark feelings? Okay. Now, this part to me is the hardest part, right? And I get choked up at this part because, and I'm sharing this with you, and I wish Lou was still here. I think he got off, but I even had this discussion last night, and it touches my heart. You guys, right? The ones here, the ones on this podcast, and the ones to come. We've been through shit, right? We've all been through shit. And I don't know your stories. I don't know, how much darkness you've seen or how much hurt or pain or suffering that you've gone through. I don't know. I know mine. But at the end of the day, right? And I think this is the most powerful piece. At the end of the day, we choose to be good people. It doesn't matter what we go through. We're choosing the light. We're choosing to be good. And that's a choice that we make. And that's a true warrior, right? Someone who can be faced with all of this and still be good and make good decisions and love and want to give back. Now, I had this conversation last night with my professor because that was part of the question. How has this work been, hitting you and stuff? And that's kind of what I said, right? I said, look, here's what I'm going through. This is what I'm going through. But in the face of all of that, I mean, it could have went really wrong, right? It could have went really wrong. I could have turned into a monster, but I didn't. And he said, let that set in for a while. Let that truly set in. And I did, and it brought tears to my eyes. Because what does that say about humanity? That it doesn't matter how much suffering we there's people who overcome it and they're still good. That's beautiful, right? That's beautiful. And it's a choice. Okay? We can choose to go towards the darkness, and we can choose to let all that anger and all of our pain and suffering bring us down. But there's a choice. And the fact that we choose, right? You wouldn't be here if you weren't choosing to figure yourself out, because you love so much, so deeply, that you're trying to understand. There's nothing, the thing is, it's not you, right? This world was designed already with suffering in it. We came into the trauma already was here. It was already here, it was already happening when we entered this world. The trauma, the wars, the fighting, the people disconnected, all of the stuff that's been going on was here before you and I got here. And we're resilient. How amazing is that? I mean, we're resilient to it. It's not easy, but we're resilient. You should be proud of yourself. This is where you should be proud of who you are and the fact that you've overcome all of this, because it's not easy. It's not. None of this work is easy. Life is not easy. Okay? But we have beauty in it. And we have our brothers and sisters who are here to support each other through it. So literally this part of the movie, I don't know if you guys are Harry Potter fans. I am. But I love it because it is alchemy, right? And when we think about alchemy and we think about how it works, we can say that if you think about like the dark arts, right? Because they talk about the dark arts in Harry Potter. And that's why it's easy to relate to alchemy and what it means. But if we look at it, the dark arts, and we see that there are people who could have easily went into the dark arts, right? Well, we look at Harry's story, he's connected to the darkness. He's marked by the darkness, and he's trying to figure out if he's dark, right? We see this in Star Wars. We see this in all of these movies, right? But those who choose to be resilient and move through that darkness and choose to be good anyway, those are the real warriors. Those are the warriors. Okay. So, do you remember when Harry Potter was worried how he might be bad because he was angry all the time and he had dark feelings? He enthusiastically answered, yes, of course. The conversation was Sirius Black. That was the moral of the entire story. Exactly. Sirius told Harry, listen to him carefully. Then he said, you're not a bad person. You're a very good person who bad things have happened to. Besides, the world is split into good people and Death Eaters. You've got all the light and the darkness inside of you. What matters is the part we choose to act on. That's who we really are. You see, I believe that that people truly act in good nature. They truly want to do good. And there's very few that don't. Now we're wired this way. We're wired to do good in the face of darkness. And very few are not. And that's because we have emotions. And the only thing that has kept us from truly tapping into that is people telling us not to have emotions. Don't cry. And the dark emotions are what I'm talking about. What we label dark emotions are uncomfortable emotions. But most people don't act on darkness. Most people don't act on those things. If they acted on their darkest thing, we'd be in real big trouble. Real big trouble. I mean, we are now because the people that are running the country, the people that are running the world right now are so disconnected from emotional ties. They can't see it. They can't connect to it, most of them. We wouldn't be at war if this was the case. And some people don't, and they're sociopaths and psychopaths, and clinically that means that they can't feel emotion. They don't understand it. But the majority of the population does. We just need to heal, and that's it. That's all it's going to take is healing. Now, how does that happen? Well, it's not very easy. It's not an easy thing. I get it, he sighed. We all have shame. We all have good and bad, dark and light inside of us. But if we don't come to terms with our shame, our struggles, we start believing that there's something wrong with us, that we're bad, flawed, not good enough. And even worse, we start acting on those beliefs. If we want to be fully engaged and be connected, we have to be vulnerable. In order to be vulnerable, we need to develop resilience to shame. Okay. See, let's see what she said. Christina, she has a lot to say here. Yes, recently I did social media cleanup. Oh, yeah, we read that. I found that vulnerability and shame is higher. We've been taught not to share. But the funny part is that the vulnerability brings release because it allows others to let down their walls. Oops, I meant vulnerability. Okay. Oh, goodness. Yes, I don't cry. I'll give you something to cry about from a young age. Yeah, that's what my dad used to tell me. So my dad used to tell me this. He would be so here's the deal. I'll give you what kind of a story of mine, right? Invulnerability. So my father, he would say he would be yelling or I would do something and I was always kind of frightened to talk because I'm like, "Oh my god, I want to trigger his anger." So so I would just kind of stay quiet and I would think, "Oh, if I say something positive, then, he's not going to it's not going to trigger him to yell or get upset and lecture me and not just lecture me, but yell at me." And to the point where it almost felt like he was going to abuse me, right? So I said, "Okay." I would stay quiet and then I would say something like, oh, dad, I'm going to be doing this. And then it didn't matter what I said. It was always going to turn out into something and it was always going to be yelling and it was always going to be abuse. Okay, so fine, whatever. So all this yelling, whatever, I'd start crying because what do you do? Like, I was like, what did I do wrong? Like, I was just trying to, be nice. Anyway, so I'm going to cry now. It would come up, right? And I would start crying. And then he would look at me and say, keep crying and I'll give you something to cry about. Right? So I had to stuff down the tears and cut off my throat chakra, which is probably why I have thyroid issues now, right? As an adult. Okay. So I'm getting very emotional today, obviously. But that, right? Being unable to communicate and to cry, it screwed me up. Right? I was like, okay, you're going to give me a reason to cry. You already have. But what more reason are you going to give me? Like, hit me? Abuse me? Like, what? So now, do I live in those past stories? No, but the trauma's there, right? It's there inside of me and I have it, but I don't choose to act on it. I don't choose to, what I choose to do is transmute it and love. And, with my father, I'm like, oh, he's sick. Like, I understood this. Like, my dad's going through this thing. He's not well. Obviously, he's not well if he can't be kind, right? He didn't know how. So, moving through that, right? Now, later on, he's learned, it took him years to overcome that, but still, the vulnerability of I'll give you something to cry about after you're already crying, after they're already set the abuse in motion and then they want to put more abuse on it, and then they stuff down like, don't cry, it's not good. It's like, obviously I'm crying for a reason, right? I'm not just crying for no reason. I don't just randomly cry. Like, I was good at regulating my own emotions. Hey Baram, how are you? Hey, what is this? D graft. Salute to you guys. Yeah. So really hard. Now, I don't know, you guys may or may not have been. Like I said, I don't know your story, don't know what you've gone through, but we all have gone through some sort of suffering. So we share it together. And if we learn to share it together, we can overcome it together. And when we start to connect in this way, the vulnerability, right? Then we start to heal the world. My professor last night, I mean, he was even crying because he's an older gentleman and he's a psychologist, right? Obviously, PhD in psychology. He's a teacher, he does shamanic traditions. He's gone out with shaman, he's come to New Mexico. I mean, he's done a bunch of different things. He's a healer, he's gone on his own journey, and he believes in going back to the roots of who we are to heal. But he said if 50% of the population thought like you guys did, right, because we have to write reflective papers, he said we would not be at war. And it's true, because what's going to heal us is that connection to understand that we all have suffering, and together we can connect. Now, they said this over and over and over again. You see, here's the thing I was telling, I told you guys, my roommate, it's like, yeah, okay, we have what's going on in Canada, right? We have what's going on in Ukraine. We have all these things going on in the world, even when COVID hit, right? And everybody's talking about this. Here's the deal. Who are we at war with? We're not at war with each other. We're at war with ourselves. That internal battle has actually manifested externally. For us to get to that point, we have had to be internally jacked up. How are we going to heal this, right? Well, you've got to heal yourself. And if, for instance, let me just put it this way, and it's very simple, but not so simple. I like to use Jesus Christ because I think it's the greatest example of, it's one of the best examples, not the only example, but one of the best examples of someone who saw humanity's suffering and their plagued sickness and wasn't mad at them for it, loved them regardless of it, didn't fall into it. He could have, right? What could he have done? He could have said, you know what, I'm going to fight back. But guess what? He would have just fed into the sickness, right? And that's the harder thing to do, to sit there when people are attacking you, not to do anything and love them anyway. Not easy. It's not. But most people choose that, or they choose shame, or they don't choose to talk about the vulnerability. If we opened up and talked about the vulnerability in our life, if we opened up and talked about those emotions and had a safe place to do that, we would start to heal. But where? Who has a place to do that? Do you have a place to do that? I'm asking you guys, do you? If you do, you're blessed. Good morning, Freedom. But if you don't, where do you go? There's nothing wrong with you, right? Maybe bad things happen to you, but that doesn't make you a bad person. And in the face of all this, it becomes really hard. Now, with Canada, I told my friend, if they do this peacefully and remain peaceful, no matter what happens, no matter if they're attacked or whatever, then they win. The second that somebody does something and there's fighting, there's no winning in that. We're just recycling the same suffering over and over again. And that trauma gets projected again and again and again and again. But here's the deal, I don't know that it stops in this three-dimensional time space we call life. I don't know that that storyline ever stops. If you guys watched 100, I don't know if you guys seen it, at the very end, yeah, maybe 5 people at the end choose to say, "You know what? We're done." Okay? But it takes healing and it takes vulnerability, and being vulnerable is not easy for a lot of people. It's really hard. The fact that I cried earlier, most people won't get on social media and cry and truly tap into their deep emotions, the suffering and the pain, and let it go. Do we live there forever? No. Okay. You move forward. You have resilience to it. Okay. So at this point, his wife was watching the start of the stairs. He thanked me, gave me another quick hug, and walked away. Just as I reached to the bottom of the stairs, he turned back and he said, "You're not Snape, but you're a damn good defense against the dark arts teacher." Um, Really good. Now, it was a conversation at the moment I'll never forget. On the way home that night, I thought about the line from one of the books in Harry Potter's detailing the fate of several unsuccessful defense against the dark arts teachers. One sacked, one dead, one lost his memory, and one was locked in a trunk for 9 months. I remember thinking, sounds about right. So when we think about the dark emotions, that's what it does. It kicks us in the ass. It's not easy. It's not. Okay. But what we choose to do, bad things can happen to us, but that doesn't make us bad. Okay. It's a choice. I won't go with the Harry Potter metaphor because I won't go on with the Harry Potter metaphor because I'm sure there are two that haven't had a chance to read the books. Um, but the incredible imagination made teaching shame a lot easier and way more fun. The allegorical power of Harry Potter lends itself to talking about everything from struggling between light and dark to the hero's journey and why vulnerability and love are the truest marks of courage. It is harder. So even in Harry Potter, if you guys haven't watched it, with um Malfoy, right? When Draco Malfoy, when he first meets Draco, and Draco says, you'll know who the right people are to hang out with or whatever, and he said, I can determine what's good or bad for myself. You know, in other words, don't project onto me what I should choose, and I'll choose what's right and what's good. But he knew instantly, and he chose, right? He chose to stand up in the face of somebody being cruel. That's not always easy, right? The underdog, if you will. Kind of like my life. That's what I do. I'm always like with the underdog. Let's go. You got this. Why? Because I've been there. I know what it's like. And it's not an easy place to be. It's damn hard. Not easy. But alchemy exists in this, right? And that's why I believe any alchemist is gonna love Harry Potter. This is why I like Brene Brown, because she gets it. There's an spiritual alchemic process to the storyline and the narrative. And the entire Harry Potter is about alchemy, to be honest with you. It is. The first one, the Philosopher's Stone. I mean, that's alchemy. So it is. And she takes a lot of the stuff that they talk about in alchemy and she applied it to her books, is basically what she did. Now, Brene Brown is saying, well, now I can take what she's talking about in order to relate the information to shame. What does shame feel like? Um, and for that, I'll be forever grateful, she says. I didn't see out I didn't set out to become wild-eyed shame evangelist or defense against the dark arts teacher, but after spending the past decade studying corrosive effect of shame has on how we live, love, parent, work, and lead, I found myself practically screaming from the top of my lungs. Yes, shame as is tough to talk about, but the conversation isn't nearly as dangerous as what we've been creating with our silence. Stop being silent, okay? That's what I'm going to say. Stop being silent. Get vulnerable. It's really hard. I teach people how to be vulnerable and tell their story. because once we release that, we're able to heal. Once we connect to a new narrative, and we can actually create new narratives, new stories, which is important. We've all experienced shame. We're all afraid to talk about it. And the less we talk about it, the more we have it. We have to be vulnerable if we want more courage, if we want to dare greatly. But what but as I told you, Harry Potter's friend, how can we let ourselves be seen if shame is terrified of what people might think? Let me give you an example. You're designed a product or written an article or created a piece of art that you want to share with a group of friends. Sharing something that you've created is vulnerable, and it's true. Create something and share it, right? Me creating Spirit and Coffee and sharing it, vulnerable. I've cried many times on here. I've shared many stories on here, more than most people would. I've exposed myself, basically. It's like the dreams, right? When you go into your dreams and you're standing there naked in your dream, that's vulnerable. You're being seen for who you are. And you feel, well, people are going to judge me. People, what are they going to say? And you have to be resilient to that because it's who you are. And guess what? We all are. That's what we share in common. Hi, Natalie. I found your show listening to Bin Bahram show. Love your show. Oh, good. Someone from, hi, how are you? Bahram's on here as well. So somebody from your show said, listening. Thanks, Bahram. Yeah, it's amazing. So you see, that's the interconnection too with the human, is that we are all interconnected. Alchemy will magnetize those that are ready for a message to come together. Right. And we all interconnect in some way. Why? Because the storyline, the narrative is changing. We're drawing towards each other for a specific purpose. Right. Right now, I'm talking about shame and overcoming it. I don't know how that's going to land for your day. I don't know where that's needed in your life. Okay. So thank you for letting me know, and thanks for shout out to Baram, because um he's amazing. I know he talks of he goes into the fun stuff. I go into the darker and the heavier emotional stuff. But he does, I say it's fun because talking about, you know, conspiracy theories and what everybody's doing, which is necessary, right? It's necessary to understand where everybody's at. Yeah, I'm glad you did too. Thank you, Baram. And it's rule, whatever. There's a couple people you've brought to me, and it's awesome. I'm very blessed and thankful. Um, the dialogue, right? The connection that we all have together, pretty cool. We are connecting even though we are not in the same space. Where are you from, Rural Black? Is that how you say your name? Rural. I don't know if sorry. I'm butchering that. I apologize. Um, but because of how you raised and how you approach the world, you've knowingly and unknowingly attached yourself worth to how your product or art is received. The simple terms: if they love it, you're worthy. If they don't, you're worthless. One or two things happens at this point in this process. Okay, once you realize that if your self-worth is hitched to what you've produced or created, it's unlikely that you'll share it. Okay. Reread that again. Once you've realized that your self worth is hitched to what you've produced or created, it's unlikely that you'll share it. Or if you do, you'll strip away the layer or two of the juiciest creative and innovatives to make it um, reveal less risky. There's too much on the line just to put your wildest creations out there. And there is. Okay. You're living in Arizona. Awesome. Well, I'm pretty close. I'm in New Mexico. So there you go. Um, and that's the truth. We don't dare as greatly if we are afraid, if we attach our art to our self-worth or to our creativity. And guess what? It's not easy to put yourself out there. Like, again, Spirit and Coffee, I've been doing this for 5 years, but trust me, putting myself out there is vulnerable. Like, here's who I am. Is it going to be received? It may not. Who knows? And if this grows bigger, I'm gonna probably have haters. I've had haters. People hate all the time, you know, and I just love them up no matter what. but it's vulnerable, and you're like, shit, will people like me? We have this wanting to be belong. We want belonging. We want connection. We're wired that way. Let's say the majority of humanity is wired that way. Okay. The only ones who are not wired that way are individuals who are have a condition. They label it, right? Sociopath, psychopath, all that. That they don't have the ability. There's something in their cognition that doesn't allow them to connect to the emotion. There's nothing, it's not that they're wrong. It's that they're not wired like we are. Okay. And that's a very few percent of the population. We don't have we just have people who've been very wounded and hurt. That's it. And now we're looking at how do we heal from that trauma? How do we move through our trauma because we're good people? But very few are wired not to just not care. Very few people. Okay. So we won't risk ourselves. We won't put ourselves out there, and then we feel vulnerable. Okay. So for those of you, like I know Bahram, in a way, I think there was a time I was talking um about, like, I don't know if I should, put my podcast on. Just get out there. Just do it. You know what I mean? I just did it. I don't, you know what my advice would be? Just do it. It's Nike's advice, right? Just do it. Like, there's no perfect timing. She goes into perfectionism, which is a big thing. It's a problem, right? We're perfect. What? We're not perfect. We're never going to be. There's no such thing as perfect. We're perfectly imperfect, and that's awesome. It's awesome. That's the beauty. Okay. So if you do share, I'm sorry. Yeah. Let me do that again. If you do share it in the most creative form and the reception doesn't meet your expectation, you're crushed. Your offering is no good and you're no good. The chances of soliciting feedback, re engaging, and going back to the drawing board are slim. You shut down. Shame tells you that you shouldn't have even tried. Shame tells you that you're not good enough and you should have known better. Okay. If you're wondering what happened, if you're attached to your self worth, to your art, to your product, and people love it, let me answer that from the personal and professional experience. You're even deeper trouble. Everything shame needs to hijack and control your life is in place. You've handed over your self worth to what people think. I planned out a couple of times, but now it feels like Hotel California. You can check in, but you can never leave. You're officially a prisoner of pleasing, performing, and perfecting. Okay, this is important. And it does get me in trouble. I'm going to tell you how it gets me in trouble. So I wouldn't say, really be with this information, because I'm not here to perfect and perform and all that stuff. If I was, you guys would, I don't know what you would see. I'm not here to perfect this podcast. I'm not here to perform and be perfect. In fact, the other day I had snot coming out of my, it's all over. And you know what? I'm not going to take it off. I don't really care. I'm going to be raw and real, because that's what the world needs, is raw, real people. Not some fake pretend, let me pretend I'm somebody I'm not, and then this perfectionist, polished, clean, I don't know what. I'm not, it's this is not me. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be real and real authentic and raw. When we start to say it's not perfect and we start to package it really perfect, now there's this expectation, and then, like she said, we put ourselves in this trap. And that's dangerous, because then we become performers, and we see this with entertainers, right? Entertainers aren't necessarily who they are on stage. Sometimes they even take on whole new personalities, because they have to separate their self. They're performing, they're putting on a show. It's a show. It's like a magic show, right? And we're enticed by that magic. Okay. And yes, we can go into the sorcery behind it as well, but it's a magic trick. They're not really, when you talk to them, if you got to know them as a human being, they're different from their stage performance. You hear it all the time. Well, I have a different name when I'm on stage. Or she's really shy when she's not on stage. She becomes a whole other person. And now we're there to please. And you see these people, if they can't continue this rodeo show of performing and perfecting, if they can't continue it, they go downhill really fast. And we see this with a lot of child stars and stuff like that, because the world is thinking of this perfection. We saw it with Britney Spears more than anybody. That poor girl, she, right? We saw it with her. That's what this is talking about. So we become our own worst enemy in a way. When we're authentically who we are, I laugh at myself all the time. I'm like, yeah, right, I messed up. Or if I do something or say something, and I try my hardest, even when I'm on here, because spiritual alchemy, practical use of esoteric wisdom, not about judgment. But there are times that I bring in judgment. Why? Because I'm human. And I try to say, hey, look, this is judgment. And I'm going to say it. I'm not going to lie about it. I'm going to tell you this is coming from, or this is my opinion, right? But you have your own. You have your own way of looking at the world and being with the world. So again, the vulnerability of actually being authentically you, will I be received? Because once that happens, right? Once you put yourself fully out there, if you're not accepted, what does that feel like? Well, it doesn't feel like belonging. And then shame surfaces from that. And we go into a hole, or we do all kinds of weird shit, and we're not enough, and all these crazy conversations come out. But if we love ourselves, who we truly are, we know we're good people, then we can be vulnerable and cry like I did earlier. And oh, wow, like what? That's who I am. I am who I am. I'm not going to put on these bells and whistles and pretend I'm somebody else. It's just not me. It's not going to happen. You're never going to get that from this. That's never what this is going to be. This podcast will never be that. It's always gonna be raw and real, and it's gonna be live, and it's gonna be on the fly, and it's gonna be whatever comes up, comes up. It's never gonna be, "Let me write a script and da 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 and make it perfect." I'm not perfect, and we need more non-perfect people. Well, we all are non-perfect, but we need more people to say, "Hey, I'm not perfect. Here I go. Accept me or don't." Don't know what to say if you don't. I love you anyway. If you do, awesome. Let's hug. Let's connect. Let's see what we can do. Okay. So there you have it. Raw and real, full on. And you ain't even seen my face live, Ron Real. I used to get up in the morning, go in my pajamas and do my podcast. Okay. I'm not here to entertain and be like, hey, look at me. Yay, woo, which is fine. I'm not saying that's wrong that people do that. But what she's saying is that it's a trap. And that's what I love. We're not judging it. We're saying, hey, there's a consequence here when you perform. Okay. It's like Hotel California, like she says, you can check in, but you can never leave. You're officially a prisoner of pleasing, performing, and perfecting. I am not trying to be a prisoner of that. That's all I'm saying. It's okay if other people want to. There's nothing wrong with that. But it will have a consequence on them. Okay. Yeah. Own one's imperfections. Yeah. Yes. Amen. Woo. Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna continue on this tomorrow, and I'm probably gonna get on earlier, you guys. I think I'm gonna start doing earlier. If I start doing earlier, I might go longer. I don't know. But I'm trying to get up early. I'm trying this new practice. I'm ready for this new part of my life. And I want to continue reading Daring Greatly, because I think going over shame is really critical. I think Brene Brown is awesome. Um, I have listened to a couple of her seminars. I recommend you listen to her. She talks about it from a place of a scientific mind woman. She's very, I would say, left brain. And she's battling herself, it sounds like, with recognizing that vulnerability is the key to human healing. And she's trying to figure that out for herself, and she's scientifically wanting an answer. She's like wanting the magic pill, right? At least that's how I see her. And she's not going to get a magic pill. There's no easy way out. And scientifically, she's realizing, oh shit, if I want to understand this, I have to actually go through it. And that is the truth. Science can stand on the outside pretending that they know. But when you look at the scientists' lives, I'd say, well, what is your quality of life? How are you living? Are you happy? Those are more important questions than what is the great discovery you found in science, because we are actually impacting the way science happens, right? We impact it in our observations. Anyway, I'm not going to get into that whole thing, but at the end of the day, how people live, their quality of life is what's important. That's what's going to heal us. That's going to heal consciousness. It's going to heal the world. And the more that you guys do this for yourself, right, the greater impact it's going to have. If we can tip the scale, if people could really, truly have resilience to shame, resilience to their dark emotions, work through their dark emotions, and come out and still choose to be good people, if we could get 50% of the population to do this, we have a chance at the greatest healing we've ever seen, because now we have the greatest population on the planet. And all those people can heal their consciousness and heal that plague of suffering. Will it happen? I don't know. But I'm committed. I'm committed to it, obviously. I've committed my whole life to it. So there you go. All right. So I love you guys. Have a fantastical day. Oh, I can't get on tomorrow. I'll see you guys Monday because I work tomorrow. Sorry. It's one day I work. So I'll be at work. But I love you guys. Byron, keep at it. I'm so proud of you for your, um, you getting on there and educating people and doing your thing. It's totally awesome. Keep going. And for those who are interested in like doing their podcast or like stumbling with how they want to express their vulnerability, reach out to me. I can support you in that way, right? I can help you to like really um, have the courage to step into it. Um, because that's what it's about. We're a family, we're supporting each other. All right. So have a great day. I love you guys. And of course, I will be seeing you on Monday. Okay. Bye bye.